And I have to start out by insulting you.
Of
So
course, I wouldn't expect it any other way. Just to give you a brief introduction, and if any of this information is wrong, you can, of course, correct me. But we are here with Faust, and he is a Dutchman. He's a Netherlander. He is an activist. He is an online commentator, and he's a friend of the show. And what else would you like to call yourself?
I don't think I really call myself anything specific. I used to be more involved with activism, maybe even lobbying, you could say to an extent, back when it was big. But yeah, what I used to be part of a group called Erkenbrand in the Netherlands, which back in 2016 got fairly big, made the news a bunch of times. We got some stuff done, and basically I was doxed at one point, and I could decided to just continue going on under my own name. I genuinely am called Faust. Lots of people don't believe me, but yeah, it's just a German name, and my parents gave me that. So yeah, I'm somewhat
Now,
known in the
is that your
Netherlands.
real name? Is that
Yes,
your actual name,
it
Faust?
is actual
Wow.
name.
Okay.
Yes. My name is Faust Lancer. There is just about no more German name you can find except putting von in between, and I am firmly of the opinion we should reinsert the aristocracy just so I can get that.
So it's actually quite difficult to find you because there's so many people out there who will use the fake name Faust. Where can people find you? Because I know you have a YouTube and I follow your YouTube. Is there any other place where people can find out more from you? Because I do know you've podcasted as well in the
Yeah,
past.
I do a lot of podcasts actually still, but it's mostly in Dutch. We've got a platform we're trying to build called Europodcasts, and what we're trying to do there is sort of what TRS does as an online radio network, but only for Europeans. Because while I've got criticisms of TRS, I do think their platform strategy works well as a place for people to find each other, network, and so on. So do podcasts on there in English and Dutch. I have another YouTube channel in Dutch called Dietse Bazuin, where we do regular podcasts. And I am also a commentator on a panel for a Flemish nationalist website called React News, reactnews.net. And there we do a sort of more serious presentation discussion. And the other Dutch podcast is Wild Geraas, which is more in the style of sort of like TRS. Sort of shows.
And
But
that's it. Just
yeah,
to say that about TRS, that I wish you the best of luck with that, because one thing that TRS did recently, and for people who don't know, we're talking about the rightstuff.biz. They really took their entire platform in house. So they not only have a paywall, but they went the extra mile, and I think they have their own streaming platform, kind of like Nick Fuentes was trying to do. And I think that's really something where people should be at. Is that what you're doing as well?
we are not of the opinion that you should pay for content. Content should be a sort of the whole idea of content is to convince people it's propaganda, right? So what we do is we do our own hosting, we do our own web security. We've got enough guys who know enough about like web security and so on to do all of that ourselves. So it's hosted in Panama and things like that. So it's we don't track IPs, all this sort of stuff. So if the feds ever come knocking, they won't be able to find you through our platform, which was a concern for us, especially considering that we are aiming at a European market with European audience, and we hope to get more European content creators on board as well. And laws here are considerably more restrictive than in the United States. We couldn't be like what TRS does with their frequent Holocaust denial and so on.
Well, that's it. So you said it's hosted in Panama. Now, this is something that doesn't get brought up a lot. I find this very interesting. I don't know if anyone else does, but I find it because when people, especially online content creators, they kind of get their own things going, they keep their secrets held to their chest. But would you say that getting hosting in Panama is a thing you'd recommend to other people? Because that's something I've always wondered
If
about.
you're not in the US, yes, because Panama is sort of like digital Switzerland. They have a lot better internet security laws than most other places, so they don't divulge information that easily. Of course, what we are aiming to do in due time is to just put everything on our own servers. But if you are in Europe, you need to be GDPR compliant, you need to be compliant with local laws and so on. So that makes that more difficult. But we do aim to just have security and hosting entirely on our own platforms.
Well, I was going to ask you, you kind of brought up an interesting point there talking about TRS and about how you won't dabble in any of the Holocaust related stuff. I was wondering because I think you present a very unique European perspective, and a lot of people in North America don't really know what it's like. You're a man in the Netherlands. That's what I tell people. You're the man on the ground in the Netherlands. Now, does something like the Holocaust is that talked about a lot there, or do people really care? Because it seems like that's something that's a focal point of the American experience.
Do you mean Do you mean like in the nationalist movement, or do you mean in the public in general? Because in the nationalist movement,
Let's say the nationalist movement.
Yeah, the nationalist movement is a big topic. In fact, there's been a few incidents in the last decade or so where it was a major issue. So in 2011, there was a law passed which decriminalized Holocaust denial. And there was in 2017, Mein Kampf was republished in the Netherlands with massive amounts of commentary in front of it. So there's, technically speaking, no law prohibiting it, but under the criminal code, there is a law against insulting groups under which you would be convicted anyway. There was an incident where David Irving came to the Netherlands to give a lecture, and several prominent right-wing journalists and one future politician spoke with him and published an interview in a dissident blog, which is reasonably big over here. That was a big incident. Back when I got doxed, there was also an incident involving race and IQ, which after my doxing and the massive news story about Erkman at the time, this provoked a discussion about whether race and IQ was actually true in the Netherlands. And there were a few right-wing papers and publicists who actually sort of embraced the position, major ones, like our biggest right-wing newspaper had a columnist who sort of said that, well, that academically race and IQ is true. But the Holocaust denial in general is not a big topic for the general populace. It is, however, under nationalists, unfortunately, especially the ones who consume a lot of American media, they talk about it quite a lot.
Yeah, because especially even in Canada, it's a central pillar of anything that can be seen as maybe racialist and I've always been curious about the relationship North American dissident nationalist movement have with European ones, because it seems that oftentimes they're at loggerheads, or the various European ones, even the British ones, will look at stuff that we're doing as a bit too maybe boorish and vulgar.
In my experience, lots of nationalist movements know about what happens in the United States and England, but not vice versa. An American might know about, say, Golden Dawn or Noordfront or Casa Pound, but he won't know about the Flemish nationalist movement or the German underground National Socialist scene or anything like this. And all of those people do know what the Americans are doing. And it's a very, very different style of doing things. My experience is generally that European movements are far better organized on the ground, far better at OPSEC and things like that. But they're not as good at online propaganda as the Americans. The Americans are omnipresent online, and the Europeans are much stronger on the ground. It's been my experience.
Well, that's very interesting, and I wish you the best of luck with your Europodcast project. You can count me as a subscriber once that gets up and running, because I think there's a lot to learn from many different sides. But you had also kind of alluded to this, and this comes up a lot in your online writing. I know you're quite humorous online, but you really have some strong opinions about America and Americans and how Americans do things. Would you say your opinion is negative?
To put it lightly, yes. I'm not impressed with it. To start with, how nationalists. I'm not impressed with the American nationalist movement. In 5 or 6 decades, they haven't really accomplished very much except shooting a couple people and doing podcasts. There's no real on-the-ground movement to speak of, as far as I can see in the United States. If I grab the Flemish movement, for example, which is of the Dutch-speaking countries the strongest movement, they've got their own trade unions, they've got their own medical insurance, they've got their own political party, several in fact, because Flemish nationalism is civic nationalism and ethnic nationalism, depending on which party is speaking. Like Vlaams Belang is more ethnic nationalist, though they don't express it openly. And the CD&V and N-VA are civic nationalists. But even the N-VA is probably more right-wing on things like immigration than the Republican Party in America. But yeah, there's not really any organizations that I see like that in America, no student unions or anything. Even in the Netherlands, where we don't have that level of underground organization, we don't have student unions, trade unions yet, but we do have a much stronger parliamentary representation of dissidents and anti-system people. Like we've got 18 parties in parliament at the moment, which is a very Weimar level, because we can't get anything done really. But about 20% or so of seats in the parliament are for dissidents parties like Geert Wilders, Forum for Democracy, Boer-Burgerbeweging. We even have an animal rights party who wants to prohibit slaughtering animals and eating meat. So that's chaos. But
before I forget,
yeah,
I was going to ask what your opinion on Geert Wilders is, because he was a character that we were very much aware of over here around the time of Trump's rise. It was him and Marine Le Pen. Like there was this sort of we kind of figured out about, there's all these little upstart nationalist movements, but I haven't heard about him for quite some time. And what's your assessment?
Wilders was around for a decade before Trump. He started his own party, I think it was in 2006 or 2007. He's been sort of a pillar of anti-system opinion. He's more hardline than I think pretty much any politician you'll find in the Anglosphere, but he is not an ethnic nationalist. And he's also very much a Zionist. I think you will, with Wilders, you get exactly what's on the tin. You get pro-Israel and you get anti-immigration. And he will say things like we need to protect our culture, our traditional values. He wants a complete zero immigration, start remigration, ban the Quran, ban mosques, ban veils. He's very anti-Islam. Quite a lot of nationalists over here don't trust him. They think he is sort of a fifth column for the Israeli lobby, and to an extent that's true. But at the same time, he is, in my opinion, not a negative force. He has moved the discourse in the Netherlands about immigration a lot to the right. It is quite normal at this point to just argue against immigration in general, and to even argue for remigration. So I think Wilders is sort of like, if you want to stop migration, he's fine. If you want anything more of an agenda than that, like any sort of economic reform, any sort of social reform, he's not your guy. We have Forum for Democracy that is more in line with that, but those guys have sort of slid downhill into conspiracy theory land. They're sort of like Dutch Alex Jones, but they're in Parliament. So, yeah, I think Wilders is okay. I mean, he's not going to get anything done. He's never going to form a government. He's never going to be invited in government. But he can try blocking as much bad things as he can. And he's been very influential in the Dutch discourse. At this point, you could say a lot more in the Netherlands than in, for example, England.
I was going to say, before I forget, for people keeping score, Dutch Alex Jones, put a pin in that for later as a character we can really sink our teeth into. I got a good feeling about Dutch Alex Jones as a character. But one thing I wanted to ask you before I forget, so like we were talking about, there's certain, when it comes to the Western nationalist parties, there's certain perennial topics that always come up. You know, Zionism is probably a big one that a lot of our guys don't stop talking about. I was wondering if there's any topics or any real concerns that happen in the Netherlands that we, from what you've seen, the Western people don't even talk about, or the North American rather, or is there more different things that you're concerned about in the Netherlands?
Sure. We've got Dutch irredentism, like there's generally, like, among the Flemish and Dutch movement, there's this sort of irredentist opinion of we need to, Belgium needs to stop existing as a country and be reunited with the Netherlands. That's a pretty strongly held opinion by quite a lot of people. Oh yeah. You will see it at the biggest nationalist event is in Kortrijk near Ypres, which is a celebration of the First World War dead of Belgium, Flanders, because if you ask the Flemish, they're not Belgians, they're Flemish. And there's about 5,000 to 6,000 people at those events, and they always fly the irredentist flag of the Netherlands, which is, rather than red, white, blue, it's orange, white, blue in slightly different shades. And that's the flag of the United Netherlands, including Belgium and Luxembourg, which is, that's a topic unique to the Netherlands. You don't see much irredentism, I think, in nationalist movements anymore. Like, Portuguese don't want Olivenza back necessarily. I don't think the Italians are still busy trying to take back, the Croatian coast. So that's a unique topic we have over here. Other topics
It's kind of like your Taiwan then in that case, right?
Belgium has always been a part of the Netherlands culturally, ethnically, and so on. It used to be Calais and so on spoke Dutch as well. Dunkirk, that's a Dutch word, Duinkerken, which means church on the dunes, which is now in France, but that used to be Dutch-speaking areas. And the really hardline irredentists, such as myself, want northern France back to the Netherlands as well. But yeah, sort of like Taiwan, I guess.
Well, it's kind of funny. There used to be more sentiment like that because I was reading that book, The National System of Political Economy by Frederick List, and he was making a claim that the best way to bring down Britain, and this would have been published at the beginning of the 20th century, he was talking about how Germany should invade pretty much the entirety of Scandinavia and retake over the Netherlands to get access closer to the ocean and things. And I read that. I'm like, I know a guy who might agree with that.
Yeah. That's generally the opinion of Dutch National Socialists, to have like a sort of greater German federation in which the Netherlands and Switzerland and Austria and Scandinavia are united, like sort of an EU with all the good countries. Before we go on to the next one, you asked me two questions previously, which I still want to address.
And also, you do need to insult me.
Yes.
I'm owed.
Yes, damn it! I wanted to start this with saying that you and Judas need to stop burning so much rice. It's a bad example.
Fair.
Yes. Now, back to the hating Americans question, which I have more things to say on that one.
Oh shit!
I talked about how I think nationalists in America aren't really doing a great job. There's a lot. I've heard many excuses for this, but that's not the only thing. I think American culture in general, America as a nation, is immature and sort of schizophrenic. I am actually more of the opinion that the southern states, the former Confederacy, has a stronger identity than the United States as such. I would think that the United States is too big and controlled by too moneyed interests. Like the elites of America have no connection with the people, and that's also in part because it's too big geographically with too many separate cultures, and they export that to everywhere. So now every elite in the world has become untied from the people. But I think Southern, that's the sort of Confederate revivalists. I think that has merit. I also think like a Yankee, like states like Maine and Vermont and so on, they had an identity at one point, but increasingly American identity is becoming money and hamburgers and cars, and there's no architecture, no values, no traditions. All of that is being washed away, and I really think that should be a much bigger focal point of the American nationalist movement, to rediscover their own roots. Because just complaining about the Israel lobby and complaining about black crime, that doesn't move you forward very much. I think you need to find your own roots to get somewhere. Like I think America died somewhere around like 1910 or something, because I think they had something of a germinating culture before then. Like Art Deco was a big thing back then. That's sort of an American architectural style with skyscrapers. You had their own sort of literature, starting with people like Jack London, with Poe, Melville. There was a budding culture there, and it's seems to have been completely washed away. I don't see much authenticity in America anymore. And I think they could be, and they need to find that first before they can really get forward anywhere. Because just complaining is a completely negative outlook on things. You need to have a clear idea.
That's a good point. And also, I'd like to bring up William Faulkner as another author of American Note. And he actually is correct, because when I think about America, because I still think about America as an outsider, as a Canadian, but it's such an expansive nation, and there's so much, this is kind of a bad word for people, but biodiversity in the types of terrain. It's kind of an old comment to make, but yeah, it's like 4 or 5 nations within a nation. And, everyone, I think the problem you pointed out, and this is one I've been kind of grappling with, where how many American nationalists also want to see America destroyed. And some of them, I think they want it literally destroyed. They would like to see they'll talk about America as the great Satan. And I'm sure, we always have our banter, but sometimes I ask them, like, if you think America is irredeemable and there's nothing that you want to save, then, it's going to end very badly for these movements. And I think it's difficult to run a nationalist movement if you're also saying we should destroy the nation. That's just my
Yes,
feeling on it, right?
I think you need to have a positive image of what you're trying to achieve and present, and not purely like criticism is nothing if you can't put something better on the table, right? So, what would you replace this current system with? And then you get all kinds of LARPy stuff about, like you get Spencer's White Imperium, and you get Stryker's
Yeah.
Marxist Plato economics, all these things, which I think are completely off base and unrealistic. So, my criticism of the American nationalist movement, besides not doing very much, is that they don't have a coherent message and they don't have a coherent identity to persuade people. Like, as it's easier in Europe, of course. Like, as a Dutch nationalist, I can appeal to hundreds of years of history and events and just say, well, this is how it used to be. This is what we should return to. Everyone lives in a windmill, wears clogs, and we all sell weed. And that's what we're striving for.
Well, you make a good point. One thing I've noticed, and I'm not trying to throw any particular movement under the bus because we can be as guilty of this as anyone on our show, but we find that in North America, US and Canada, there's a very sharp interest that people have in world events, but not even really national events. So a lot of Americans across different shows will talk incessantly about, UK, Ukraine and Russia, but they'll never bring up really anything America. They're more interested in what's going on in the rest of the world, which is also kind of a negative thing North Americans do. Like we want to busy ourselves in the rest of the world when there's enough to talk about at home. And, our show, we can do more of that. Like I really want to get more back to Canadian politics, and most Canadian shows, most Canadian commentators don't talk that much about Canada, really.
Exactly. That's why I have a policy of never talking about current events on my English language channel. I do discuss current events in Dutch, but we do try to keep it to a Dutch perspective. Like, how is the Ukraine crisis affecting us in the Netherlands? How is the economy of the Netherlands affected, etc. Things like that. We try to keep a Dutch perspective and always to grab some local Dutch news. But unfortunately, the general public in the Netherlands is also, in fact, because American media creeps and crawls everywhere. It's like a strangle vine. It gets everywhere. If you hear the youth talk over here, they speak half English with some like African and Surinamese loanwords and half Dutch. It's a disgrace. But you see this over focus on what happens in America. Like back when George Floyd, for example, was killed or died or whatever, there were BLM protests over here, and the media was writing about it as if in the Netherlands blacks were being killed constantly. Well, Dutch police shoot about 5 people a year, most of whom are white. So all these trends are imported into the Netherlands. You notice this as well when you read newspapers and magazines. It's almost as if these Dutch-born, Dutch-raised, Dutch-educated journalists live in California, because they have that sort of perspective on things. And whenever new world events happen, you also get these sort of Americanized perspectives you hear from people. It's really insidious how much American media influences the world, and in a negative way generally.
Yeah, it's interesting to consider that the New York Times is not just America's newspaper. It seems to be the world's newspaper. And if you know anything about how corrupt the New York Times is, everyone hates this thing. Everyone knows they've gotten so many things wrong, and they can plainly see it is just, I think people have their thoughts about Mencius Moldbug, but he had made a good point where he's like, just imagine the New York Times is just an extension of the American state apparatus. That's pretty much what it is. And so once you see that, it's like, oh, it's around the world too. The Black Lives Matter movement was probably the best example, because you have people in Sweden and in all these other places where, well, Sweden's a bad example because it's half black now, but you got countries where like they don't even have black people really, and then they're having Black Lives Matter, and it's like, how is this happening? Because it's not organic. It can't be. It has to be some kind of manipulation. And it's funny that the long reach of the America as a force magnifier for culture, that even the African American identity is projected so strongly back onto Africa that you have actual Africans basically trying to act like guys from Compton.
Yep.
Which is such a strange thing, because black people here are trying to cobble together like a vaguely African identity.
You notice this, I hear this from older people in the Netherlands. Like, we used to have colonies, of course. We have used Suriname, which was a slave plantation colony. And we had a few places in Africa, which were also Dutch colonies, later taken over by the British. So we had some blacks. And then, funnily enough, when we decided to decolonize Suriname, literally half the population moved to the Netherlands, because they didn't actually want to be free. They wanted Gibbs. it's still the case with the Antilles. Like we have a few islands in the Caribbean still, which we desperately want them to be independent because they cost us a lot of money to maintain, but they don't want to be independent. But you saw these, like when blacks from Suriname moved here en masse, which about 200,000 did. They had their own little culture, Surinamese culture, and over the years, increasingly, you see them adapting things like Bob Marley style music and weed culture. You see them adopting American rap and hip hop fashion, these sorts of things, and you increasingly see them losing their own historic culture they had built in Suriname, which is disappearing, and this is happening in Suriname itself as well. So America, as a force in the world, does not just destroy white cultures, but every culture.
Yeah, the American black culture is swallowing up every other African culture. That doesn't get talked about a lot, and I think it's the Netherlands are such an interesting case study because it's just these two things colliding, like you said, the migrants and then this American thing, and you're just watching this strange magic happen before your eyes. And you had some just quickly to go back to your radio project, your streaming
Yeah.
project. One thing I was always wondering about is because you are a very nationalist minded guy, and you're very very strong on that. Do you see any allegiances or allies that you can have with other European nations or other groups? Because I know you are a part of our chat room, and you're not a huge fan of Canadians, but in terms of European countries or any other country, do you see any alliances being forged with them?
I don't actually really have that much of a. I don't really have that much of an opinion on Canadians, really. I mean, you were used as shock troops in the First World War against the Germans, and really, it wouldn't have been better for the world if Germany had won the First World War. We'd have avoided that whole Second World War thing. We'd have avoided the collapse of the Tsar, 70 years of communism, etc., etc. Anyway, I think Canada. God, you're a victim of the Americans as much as we are, I guess. Would Trudeau ever have been elected if American media didn't have influence over you? But in terms of yeah, well, like I said, especially among the National Socialist scene, there's this huge sympathetic force with Germany, and I'm also of the opinion that we like. You asked me earlier about the EU and how I thought if the EU could work and so on. I think the EU is probably necessary, but it needs to be demolished and rebuilt because the people in charge and the goals it tries to achieve are negative for European nations and European people themselves. But in order to compete with things like America, China, Russia, we need to have a strong unifying force. So it would be under German leadership, probably as it is today in de facto, and they are moving towards a European army away from NATO. And I think we need these things. We need common trade policy and common defense policy, but it needs to be oriented in such a way that it is more federal than what it is now, which is sort of absorbing and trying to dilute individual nations' cultures and history. So I think Europeans only allies are other Europeans, and I don't think there's much cooperation to be found with Americans or anyone else across the pond because the situation is very different. There's different history and so on. There's very little communication. Like we constantly consume media from America, and we know what happens in America. Most Americans don't have any idea what's happening in Europe. This is why people accuse me of being anti-white because I am vigorously anti-American and very, very pro-Dutch. But I think there's not really a practical sense of white unity with people who are 5,000 kilometers away. There's no practical way we can really help each other anyway. So who can you work with? Well, with your neighbors. We work a lot with the Flemish movement. I work with some of the German movements. So can you cooperate? Yeah, well, with your closest neighbors, I would say. And sort of pan-European nationalist movement, I think there's a future in that.
There's one line that we were always laughing about that I see this a lot in other chats and scenes that I'm in where it's like childhood is hating the Jews, adulthood is hating the Anglos. And I remember, I see that brought up a lot of people hating the British, hating the Anglos, and you are not an Anglo fan. I was wondering if you would like to speak on that at all.
Well, I exaggerate it to an extent because I think it's very, very funny because British people, especially the English, don't really know how to handle it because it's sort of an attack from unexpected direction to have other white people and nationalists attacking them. But well, to be perfectly honest, I do think that the English mentality is very different because as an island nation, they're considerably safer. There's, of course, people who've said this before. Carl Jung wrote this on sea power and so on. I think Spengler wrote some things on this. And really, you can blame quite a lot of the problems modernity having roots in that Anglo culture. Like I think probably things started going wrong with the Magna Carta, where they started introducing the concept of consent of the governed. Whereas in every monarchy state, of course, there is in some way there is consent of the governed because a king will face rebellion and uncooperative nobles and so on if he doesn't rule well. But to introduce this idea of consent of the governed was the germination of liberalism and of individualism and of of humanism, and those three things are the fundamental philosophical problems that we face today. Individualism, of course, destroys a nation if taken to extremes. And people like, say, Sargon or something would argue that there's a moderate path of liberalism and individualism. I don't think there is. I think every idea is taken to extremes, just like nationalism can be taken to extremes under the National Socialists in the 30s, for example. Everything can be taken to extremes and will be taken to extremes by some people if not stopped. And you see this happening with, especially humanism, for example. God is gone from the world, and any sort of higher ideals are gone from the world with it. The only focus now is sort of a utilitarian happiness philosophy, where we only do things to prevent death and misery, and that's the only goal in life for anything. We don't have any sort of higher ideal. I think, for example, people like Elon Musk, despite there being a lot of flaws with him, at least he presents a more positive image of the world where we can, colonize the stars, which is something I am very much in favor of.
Yeah, you've mentioned I actually, some people think that's a kooky thing to say for me, but I'm like, I'm not against Elon Musk. I'm not against, endeavoring to visit the stars. And, if people really think that's crazy, I don't really mind it.
Yeah, I'm big into archaeofuturism. If people go onto my YouTube channel, I've got a few videos promoting archaeofuturism. I think we need tested and proven traditional values, things like the core family. How would you say this in English? Just husband and wife and children. And you need some form of religion, because if you don't have organized religion, then other things will take their place, like liberalism has taken the role of religion in today's society. And I do think you need, as a society, a higher ideal. And I'm very much a materialist in my thinking, very much a rationalist. My background is in things like mathematics and economics, and I work a lot with technology, so maybe it's just a bias as well from education and work. But I do think that the only thing consciousness can really strive to do is to sort of actively try to become God or understand God, which is why I have a very appropriate name, because that's what Faust wants to do.
Well, that's interesting. It's interesting because I was actually, and I'm going to talk about this on the show at some point, but I was actually sitting down to read The Fourth Industrial Revolution by Klaus Schwab. And I recommend that because I never actually done it. I'm aware of him, and like a lot of people are, but I never just sat down and read what his actual mission statement was. And it was crazy because there's a line in the book early on when he's talking about the economics of how will this fourth industrial revolution, which is the intersection between like the digital world and also bioengineering. It's really crazy transhumanist stuff. But they were saying, like, what's this going to do?
Why would you say it's crazy? Because how many people are... Well, I think we're sort of already in the first stages of transhumanism. Transhumanists will say that we're already in the stage of wearables. For example, pacemakers, glasses, watches, phones to an extent are a help to short-term memory. These things are not integrated into the body yet, but they perform a lot of functions that the body would normally do itself. So we're at the first stage of transhumanism. I think it's pretty much inevitable that through sort of the free market, people will always try to improve themselves and their children. So they will always go for technological solutions that make their life easier, their economic situation better, etc. So, for example, things like CRISPR embryo selection, which will improve children, Rich people will, of course, do that. The danger there, of course, is that the gap between rich and poor will not just be economical, but at a certain stage also genetic, and you have Brave New World at that point.
Yeah, the main reason I was saying it was crazy was because the line in the book, which is like, "What are we going to do in this world once many jobs are made obsolete?" And the line was that because human desires are infinite, the ways we can serve those desires are also infinite. So, in that sense, the economic model that Klaus Schwab and many others are proposing, which is like, we'll have jobs just servicing whatever new pleasure desires we have, which I think is a very, very materialist thing. And that's why I thought, well, at least space presents something else. So if you have a transhumanist society, it looks like you have at least maybe around two paths. Either you turn inward or you turn outward. You turn inward by saying, we're going to we're going to live to 700 years old. We're not going to have jobs. And the only thing we're going to live for is pleasure and excitement and become just machines that generate that. Or we have to strike out and, the Faustian spirit, pursue the stars. Yeah. But when I'm looking at the I was going to say transgender, but kind of related transhumanism model, I'm like, well, that seems like two tracks. And I'd rather pick one than the other, because the other one I just see like a downward spiral into a hell of exciting pleasure and whatnot.
Well, to address that, of course there are upsides and downsides to every technological development. I mean, just read Ted Kaczynski on that one. Like alienation is, of course, a serious problem that we face from technology, and I don't really quite have a solution for that. But I think partly that could be solved by inspiring people and giving them goals to achieve. People who inherit a lot of wealth and have never had to work in their life are extremely miserable, generally speaking, unless they find some sort of purpose to do something with that money. Now, space exploration and colonization, I think, has also other benefits in the sense that it would open a new frontier. And the new frontier would allow people to get away from central authority. And as we saw, for example, in the American West and the colonization of the Americas, generally this allows for intellectual and technological development, and for people to pursue initiatives they otherwise couldn't away from. I think we really need these new markets, these new opportunities, because if everything is just stuck on this planet, it will inevitably become more and more centralized until you get sort of like luxury space communism, which is not desirable. I would really rather have sort of libertarian space cowboy Mars.
Yeah, here's where Faust goes and Cap. I love it. But the idea there is that, you're looking at it from a very Western man point of view, which is, I think, is essential, which is, I think what we need is new frontiers. And I think that is essential. And I think what I liked about Elon Musk, and this is my feeling on transhumanism, I liked about Elon Musk when he spoke about AI, he spoke about it in this sort of cold, reserved way, as if it's inevitable. And that's kind of where, with transhumanism, from every angle I look at it, I say to people, well, this is going to happen. There's really I don't think people can collectivize in a way to turn back the clock on anything technological. So it is coming. We will live in a transhumanist world.
I've made a few videos about this, and also one criticizing the solutions that Ted Kaczynski presents. I think that trying to be against technology, trying to be a Luddite through force will never work. See, if you have space colonization, on the one hand, you can have more space, and you can also have the people who just want to be away from technological society, who do their own homesteading away from the cities. And the more land you have to do that, the more people can do that. I would imagine sort of like the great urban center surrounded by homesteaded farms and woods, and at the same time we have rockets going to Mars. That's sort of my ideal world, and we're all wearing Prussian uniforms, and the spaceships are shaped like zeppelins, ideally as well.
Yeah, and I think that's we will see once we have the ability to do that, because that is essentially how America was founded. Like, it's not going to be all white people, Europeans, whatever, but there will be pockets of them who want to find that new frontier. And they will go, and it'll be a mixed bag of families and freaks, but they're going to go out and do it. And I'm convinced, barring some unforeseen circumstance where we just can't do it, that could happen, or there's some black swan event that keeps us stuck here. A lot of the flat Earth people are probably turning off right now because the idea of leaving Earth is impossible. but the idea is like it seems obvious to me that's going to happen, and so I kind of look at it like Nick Land does. And when we read
Yes.
Nick Land, he talks about like you're going to have to change your think once you fully accept that's inevitable. You're like, okay, now we need to strategize. Like, how can we guide this momentum? How can we plan for the inevitability of people getting microchips injected in them? All kinds of kooky stuff, but it's going to happen, and that's what you're going to live in a world where you're going to want to do that because all the rich and powerful people are going to do it. And if you want to play their game, you're going to be like, okay, well, fuck, I guess I need to get this brain implant just to exist on that level. And you're going to have to make these very real decisions.
It would just be implemented through the free market, essentially, really, because that's how most of these things get implemented, not through state force, but through creating incentives and through nudging, to use a marketing term. Now, I would say that there is another frontier to be explored, which is Africa is still extremely underdeveloped, and we could, redo some things that we did in the 1900s, but that would take an even greater shift in thinking, I think.
That's true. Africa is like the wild card globally. I guess China's taking it over, but
Yeah, but the
and this
Chinese
is
will not be very good at it.
that's true. I think they're just collecting black people to get their bones or something, but something very Chinese.
Introduce them in traditional medicine. Yeah.
Yeah, but the transhumanism thing is a touchy topic because I know you're not, even if you are spiritual, you don't lead with being spiritual. That's not part of what you talk about, but a lot of people are, and you'll hear people say it's satanic and things like that. And I'm like, I'm sure it is, but I'm trying to, I think we need more people speaking of it with the inevitability that it deserves. Like,
Yeah.
I don't accept these people who say it's nothing we should worry about. I think you should worry about it. And if you want a good future, what can we do to guide this in a way where we just don't end up as a new slave class? As dystopian as that sounds.
That's exactly it. The window is slowly closing on who will implement this technology and how. The inevitability of the technology, I think, is firmly established. And if you don't think so, I've got some videos on this. You can read Nick Land. There's plenty of people who talk about this. But yeah, I think it is pretty much inevitable. And if it is guided by the people who are currently in charge, there will be a slave caste class. And that's not really what we should be striving for.
Because there was one thing I wanted to bring up that you mentioned in the past. I wrote this down when you said it. And I always wanted to talk about it because it's so counter to everything that I'd heard. But you had said that group infighting is actually necessary for greatness in regards to people
Yes.
in our scene. And I was wondering if you'd like to expand on that.
Well, firstly, I've just remembered what I wanted to say. No species has ever existed forever. Like every species that has ever emerged on Earth has died, except the ones who are still currently alive. So humanity at some point will die out, will be replaced by something else. Because evolution generally, if you look through it, it has an increasing line of complexity. And you see this in physics as well. If you look at the formation of the galaxy, of planets, and so on, complexity increases over time constantly. That seems to be a universal constant in evolution and in how stars form and how galaxies form around them and so on. And for example, the most complex planet in this solar system is the one with life. We have plate tectonics, magnetosphere, things that other planets do not have. And from that, life also starts like with nematodes and mushrooms and evolves into very complex life forms. And the life forms seem to get more and more complex over time. So I think it's you could say it's an inevitability, and that it's very likely that we are just the first life form that has developed consciousness as a tool, and that some other life form will evolve from us that will have an even more efficient use of that consciousness and take over, like we have taken over Earth and have completely dominated and stepped outside of the food chain. On infighting, the reason I say that is more or less for that same reason. I think it's Darwinian. You can only establish whose ideas and who as leaders is good through competition. And people always talk about unity and so on. And of course, at some points you need to make a united front. But if you make a united front with people who are actively detrimental to your side, this is only self-destructive. So I think those with good ideas, those who are good leaders, need to outcompete and destroy those with bad ideas and those who are a negative influence. So that's more or less my perspective on it.
I like that point because if you're in our scene at all, you've probably heard like no more infighting, no more brother wars, no more all that stuff. But then to hear someone say that, it kind of I had to shake my head a bit. I'm like, whoa, that makes more sense to me actually, because something that happened recently that didn't make a whole lot of waves, but there was two characters who were big in our scene. One was by the name of Keith Woods, the other by the name of Morgoth, who I'm sure people know, and they got into a bit of a little back and forth on Telegram. And everyone was talking, and then there's like, oh my God, they shouldn't be fighting. What it was a polite disagreement. It couldn't have been nicer. It was just, I think you're wrong about this. Well, I think you're wrong about that. And that was pretty much it. But people were so allergic to even disagreements. It's like, shut up, don't publicly disagree. And I started thinking, no, I mean, we're grown men. Like, we're able to do this, right?
This is exactly why people who say university need to be a safe space are completely getting the wrong end of the idea of what a university is about. Like, academic debate should be a battle with words. Like, you are trying to destroy your opponent. You're trying to prove you're right, within, of course, sort of bounds of rules and so on. Because if you're being intellectually dishonest, nothing improves. But the whole idea of academia is that it's a war to find truth. And that's sort of what, as a nationalist, you should be doing as well. You should look for the best idea, the best leader. And if people are active detriments and are, well, self-destructive, like I think quite a lot of the American scene is, you disassociate from them, you step over them, you if you can, you make their negative influence disappear. So yeah, I think no, there's this whole idea of unity, no punching right. That's nonsense. Not because of, like, you had this meme from, like, what was that website? Iron March? Yeah, Iron March, who had this meme of no punching right, and because they were the furthest right of anyone, they couldn't be punching right. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about, like, you're so ideologically extreme, there's no one to your right. No. You should punch right because it improves the general idea space. It improves the leadership. So, yeah, I think, like, debates are good, discussions are good, and sometimes, like, unpersoning people is good.
And that's a good point. And just so people know, we are recognizing the difference between debates and just drama, because I think you had made a comment before we started recording that,
Yeah.
you know, the moment Americans get involved, now it's about interpersonal drama, right?
Yes, because there it's not about ideas. It's not about ideas or anything like that. It becomes about who did what to whom. Like, somebody fucks his wife, and then this like every American drama in the national scene is like this, like the cockbox incident, and like Americans introduce all kinds of dumb, unnecessary drama, which I don't see happening in other places. There is infighting for the Dutch nationalism, the German nationalism, and so on. But generally, it's about significant things like, I don't know, money or like political interests or so on, membership, these sorts of things. More important things than interpersonal drama, although it does sometimes happen. But we don't fucking live stream it everywhere.
Yeah, and that's interesting because, you know, that's something I'm trying to break with myself. I'm not casting aspersions on anyone other than me when I say that I'm really into drama and I shouldn't be. And there's two things that I'm really trying to figure out how to unwork and unravel in our scene. One is the reliance on irony as a form of communication for fucking everything, and the second is obsession with drama. Now, some drama I just can't look away from. So if you tell me a story about Ethan Ralph got the shit kicked out of him twice in Portugal, I want to see that. That is funny. That's also just a spectacle. Yeah, so there is drama that is just such an insane spectacle.
I'm aware of these things through osmosis because you can't simply escape them. But every time I hear about them, all I can do is shake my head and think, what are you doing, Americans?
Yeah, and sometimes we've had to go through the other side on that, where we've had to just ignore interpersonal drama, where it's like, oh, did you know this person, cheated on their wife? And we have to be at a point where, like, okay, I don't care. I have to not care because everyone's going to have something weird like that, you know, without it being used. And we maybe it's the influence of, maybe it's a feminization thing. Maybe it's the influence of, you know, I'm sure that, you know, the declining testosterone in men over the past few generations. Maybe that's it too. There might be a lot of influences. I was just talking about that with a couple guys the other day.
I have a theory on the declining sperm count and declining testosterone in men. I wonder if it isn't just due to people jerking off way more than in the past.
That might be. Yeah, I can see, like, the porn having something to do with it. Because I was thinking about this the other day, about how even when kind of the alt-light was on the rise, and we're hating on Muslims because Muslims, they love to sexually harass, or the black guys like to catcall and stuff, and white men don't do stuff like that. And I started thinking like, yeah, but we did used to sexually harass women in the workplace. If you were a woman and you went out in a short skirt, you could expect a lot of guys to be whistling and hooting at you because you're putting yourself on display. And part of it could be good manners that, white people have, but also it's like men are more sexually dead. Like they don't even care. And I feel like we've lost something. I feel like we've lost something if a woman can walk around in like a tennis skirt and men are just inert and just staring ahead.
So the officially endorsed Blood Galaxy position is and harass more women?
Hell yeah. I'm trying to put sexual harassment back on the table. I want a woman to think like, should I wear this? Because men will stare, because men won't even look at a woman now. And part of it's that they don't want to get Me Too'd. And that's one thing. They don't want to get, in trouble or arrested, because that's a very real thing. But also, I think there is something going on where we're just not as sexual anymore as men, because men need to be the aggressive initiators. And that's kind of what women want too, even though they don't admit it sometimes.
Well, they want it from
but
certain
if we don't do that,
men.
I'm like, I think that reverberates in different ways.
They want it from certain kinds of men. It's like the same comment coming from a different person can be either interpreted as harassment or flirting. And they want like a sexual comment from Chad is welcome, and a sexual comment from an incel is not. But yeah, well, not to get into MGTOW or anything. Although I will say, just to get on the whole women thing, women have actively never contributed anything to the history of humanity except birthing people.
I feel like I got hit pretty hard in the chat when I said, for any of these political movements, we need to make room for women in some form. And all I really meant by that was saying, not just telling women to go fuck themselves. And that's kind of what America First was doing by being so anti-woman. Not saying that we need them, in leadership positions, but all I was saying was, yeah.
Well, I will say that I've had experience with leading or organizing groups and movements with women involved, and it immediately destroyed the dynamic. You will get like certain type of women will look around to find a group of highly motivated men, like a nationalist movement, which doesn't have a lot of women, and they will insert themselves and they will make themselves the point of attention, and it will be extremely disruptive. It will cause infighting between the men, and if you want to get shit done, you just need a group of men who figure out their hierarchy between each other and have it like task division, and that's it. You don't. Like, women can be introduced at the stage where you're already well on the way towards achieving your objectives, and you're already established in society. You don't want a dissident counter movement to have women in it, because it will just destroy it. And they will be the first ones to break. They will be the first ones to break and spill everything to.
And I look at us, anyone who kind of listens to shows like this, or people like you, I like to think of us as vanguardists, in the sense that we are out there trying to carve new space. I find women, like you said, do at the very best make distractions and change the dynamic. And that's why it's like, woman in a vanguardist sense doesn't make any sense. What I always imagined was, there's this movie that I like, a lot of people didn't like it, but I do, was called The Revenant with Leonardo DiCaprio, where he's in the frontier of America. And I always imagine, I think of the frontiersmen, and I always imagine the types of men who are carving out the new world, and they have their base, and it's usually tough men, crazy men, very ambitious men. And there are women in those scenes, but I'll tell you, there's only two types of women: whores and freaks. And so typically when I look at any nationalist movement, if there's women in there, odds are they're just whores or freaks. And I think that's born, not all of them, I'm sure there's some good ones, but usually, like, you get the Lauren Southerns, you get, all these other people who are very clearly just there to fuck everyone and cause problems, because only a weird woman or a slut would even want to get involved in these politics. And that's just borne out by experience.
Well, no, actually, it's
so that's why I say, keep them away.
Evolutionary speaking, it's a very rational thing for a woman to do. They sort of look at it economically. There's a untapped market of men with no women who have high potential, and what the woman will do is they'll go into that group, they have themselves a privileged position, and they will be able to pick the best of that group of men. So, evolutionary, Darwinianly, and economically speaking, it's actually a perfectly rational thing for women to do, but it works extremely disruptive.
Yeah. And I think, everyone can probably think of a couple women they like, Laura Towler, a patriotic alternative. I'm sure she's good. Like, there are exceptions. But, what you'll find, and if you're a man of a certain age, you've known enough women in your life, you will know that typically women aren't interested in this stuff, and they shouldn't be. And usually the role I imagine for women is kind of, once you blaze the trail ideologically, they're very good at being managers, and they're very good at kind of, once they think it's safe and acceptable, they just reinforce things, but they're not really equipped
Yes,
to be out here.
Opinion commissars.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great way of putting it. So that's usually what I see. Just like what most people's girlfriends and wives are like they'll kind of pick up vaguely what you're talking about, but you don't get into the nuance and all the details of it because they think it's weird. They don't get it. They don't care. And that's fine. Their job isn't to care. That's our job. And then if all you need is a woman that respects that.
Just one quick aside is you did something just now which I really, really hate, and which to me is a profound problem in American and apparently Canadian culture. You used a movie reference to explain something. And I think this is something that shows profound alienation from the real world, because you can't think of a historical example, you can't think of a real life example of a current event. You use a movie reference, which is profoundly gay in my opinion.
And part of that is just me too, because I'm just a movie guy. I've spent a lot of my life watching movies. I've noticed that over time, where I'll always try and reference movies. Usually what I'm doing is just trying to find a visual shorthand to kind of, here, put yourself here. But then I also realize another issue is that a lot of people aren't visual thinkers. So for me, when I give a movie reference, like I want you to picture The Revenant, the movie, of like the type of guy that was. It was a tough guy. It was a guy with a beard wearing a bunch of fur. But there's a lot of people out there who actually can't visualize things. I'm sure you've met them, and there's all kinds of online studies on this. They don't have the ability to conjure images in their head. So that's another reason I'm trying to get out of it, because some people, they won't get why I'm even, it'll be lost on them. But that is something that I've noticed. You're correct.
Yeah, I think it's cultural poisoning. Just one anecdote about women, though, is like women will default to the status quo and don't do much. They are not revolutionary thinkers. They're not anti-system thinkers. They will always go along with the mainstream opinion, which is why you see, of course, currently most SJWs and so on, and HR people being women. But this was, of course, the contrary, and this is a famous anecdote. Back when female suffrage was first introduced in Germany, they voted extremely conservative, and the Social Democrats, who had been advocating for female voting rights, actually lost a huge share of their seats because women voted for Christian and conservative parties. And of course, Hitler was elected by a majority of the female vote.
Yeah, and that's kind of the reference that I like to give to people. I try not to reference Hitler too much, but there's a lot of good examples, and I'll say that to some of the further right guys. I'm like, Hitler would think Nick Fuentes sounds gay. It wouldn't make sense to, even if it's not Hitler, let's say it's Mao, let's say it's Che Guevara, who any revolutionary you can think of, they're not really anti-woman. And if I look across time, I don't see pronounced, they might not have had women around, but part of their platform was not saying to hell with women. So no, I'm like, if someone could pull that off, it'll be the first time ever.
Yes, but I do think traditional leaders like Bismarck or the Kaiser or our King William I would not have given women the amount of rights they have today, which is proven destructive. Because like the sexual market is a complete mess and so on, especially due to social media. Like women perceive they have much more choice than they in reality have, which is why you end up with a lot of wine drinking cat ladies. So while you should want to include women because you need women, you should definitely put them back in traditional roles and not as leadership or anything of that nature.
I wonder if that's going to happen naturally, because it seems that no one has any good solutions for how to solve this issue other than just give women what they want and watch the marketplace of sexuality just get destroyed. So now you're in a position where all the most vehement feminists are being molested by trans people, and we're just standing there watching going, okay, this is what you wanted. Now, will you admit that this is bad? and we're just kind of waiting for them to clue into it, or I don't
But they
know. But
will never
then we
admit.
run into the problem where they need guidance too, so they're not going to do it themselves, right?
No. But they will never admit that they took a wrong path like that. Not unless society itself, top down, starts telling them that this was a mistake. And I don't see that happening anytime soon.
I was calling back to something you had said earlier about you being doxed and doxed famously, and I wanted to know just from your perspective, how has that impacted your life being doxed and being in the news, as I understand you were?
Right. Yes. So I was doxed in a. So we used to do organized conferences, and we actually got involved with like elections and things like this. And we had Jared Taylor over, Greg Johnson, Marcus Full, the Golden One. Quite a lot of these people from the known nationalist people attended these conferences. We had a few hundred people active at the time. So the media, and especially Antifa, in cooperation with the media, found us to be threatening, and especially because we were sort of involved with a group called Forum for Democracy at the beginning, who are currently in parliament and were elected. But they took a very different turn from what we were expecting, and I'm not really in support of them anymore. But back then, we seemed to have quite a lot of influence. Some of it perception, some of it real. And the media made a huge cover story in one of the biggest newspapers of the country, the Volkskrant, front page after Charlottesville. Charlottesville was the cause for them to publish this story as like these people could pull a Charlottesville in the Netherlands, and so on and so on. And they put my face in there.
That's fascinating. So Charlottesville even made it all the way over there.
Oh yeah, Charlottesville was the catalyst for quite a lot of state repression which we hadn't seen before. Before we had issues with Antifa and them trying to dox people and so on. But who reads an Antifa website, right? They could put every single person's name and face on there, and it wouldn't really impact them very much. But once it's in the media, then it's a major problem. So yeah, Charlottesville was the catalyst for a lot of that stuff. And so they published all the information they had on us, some speculative, some true, and so on. And they put my face in there. And of course, my employer found out I was fired, which in the Netherlands is hard to do because if you have a fixed contract, especially, which I didn't have at the time, it's extremely hard to fire you. We've got a lot better employment protection laws than, say, in America. But either way, they didn't prolong my contract, asked me to stop working and so on, and paid me off to leave. And for a while, it was quite annoying. I got emails from journalists, and my phone number was shared with people. I got people calling me and like, and trying to intimidate me. These were things.
Oh shit!
Someone called the police and said I had illegal firearms, and they did a house search. So for a few months, it was quite annoying. But yeah, these days I continue to publish things under my own name. I decided to just go with it. Like I'm known already, so whatever. I'll just go on. Continue going on. And these days, especially because I'm already doxed, there's not much they can hold over my head except the things I've already said in court. So I need to just be careful about what I say and how I say it. And other than that, it doesn't impact me very much. They can try and find out where I work and contact my employer again. But again, it's hard to fire people in the Netherlands. And I'm in a very in-demand field. So I can just find work very easily again. And so, like, the employer I currently have probably depends on the HR, but they would have a hard time firing me anyway. So I would say getting doxed, it's... if you're going to be doxed, make sure that you're prepared for it and you've got your life arranged for it, because it's different in the Netherlands than in the United States, because the organizations that will harass you are considerably worse, and the police there can be weaponized against you a lot worse. Over here, we've got better protections in terms of employment, in terms of police harassment, in terms of media publishing things about you. Like, they can't write outright defamatory stuff. So you can live with it.
If you could give tips on people, for anyone, like you said, make sure you have your life in order if you're about to be doxxed. Are there any tips you would give people to assist with that?
Make sure you are a skilled individual, which in an in-demand field, because then you can find a job very easily again. And make sure that you work in something that, don't work for big corporations, because they will do background checks. and don't work in office environments, because again, there you will face HR and things like that, which will do a lot more background checks. Whereas if you work in a very in-demand blue-collar field like I do, then you're going to be fine, because everyone wants you, pay is good, and they don't really care about your political opinions. In fact, quite a lot of my coworkers are, though not completely on board with my opinions, they generally don't like immigrants either.
Well, that's interesting. That's what we hear from a lot of our listeners and our fans who, and I've worked in, I know you have this image of me as this, shriveled office worker. But prior to getting into marketing, I did work in construction quite a bit. And then I worked in kitchens for quite some time as a cook. So what I noticed is, like you'd said, a different breed of person. I found, there's this big lie people tell about blue collar workers, like they don't care about politics. No, they care about politics, maybe more than people in offices. But I find that they are maybe a bit more on our side, or at least willing to hear you out a bit more.
There's
and you were a big advocate, you said, of getting people into this.
Yeah, there's an instinctive aversion to the state, because if you are a skilled worker, you've got to deal with paying a lot of taxes and having to deal with a lot of regulations. And generally, these people want to be independent anyway. That's why they learn skills or have a background in such skilled trade and so on. So, yeah, generally, these people are naturally inclined to distrusting the system to begin with.
Having been doxed, what are your feelings on anonymity in the movement? Would you say people should dox themselves even?
I think there's a dualism in that. Just to answer your question quickly about how it will affect me otherwise, I'm never going to go get a firearm license again, because if I get a firearms license, that just gives them more excuses to try and harass me, and it gives the media ammunition to say dangerous right-wing extremist is armed and so on. So, no firearms for me. That's one thing. On the issue of anonymity and being a public face, it depends on which role you want to play, really. I don't think that a commentator or a leader can be anonymous. Logically speaking, it is contrary to the role they're trying to play. So you cannot lead a movement or be a commentator anonymously. To an extent, people like Morgoth, for example, can, because they are online commentators. But someone like who was in my position, which was organizing events, being a speaker, these sorts of things, you can't be anonymous in that. Imagine if you had like a trade union which you didn't know who the leader was. You can't have that. On the other hand, if you are not going to be a leader or a commentator, you should be anonymous, because your role is to be a supporter, financially and in terms of numbers and opinion. Me and a friend of mine have this anecdote where we call these people Murray eels. Murray eels are Mediterranean species of eel, predatory, very ferocious, but they are extremely territorial, only in their own little territory. And that's how you should think of it. Like, people who don't want to take a public role should make sure that they are as extremely prepared for collapse and be able to help anyone who is a public figure. Any movement is a public group. So get a good job, make sure you have money, invest in projects that are helpful. Which is not to say that you should give me money. I don't take donations, so I'm not saying this out of self-interest or anything. But to get anything done, you do need funds, you do need a workforce, you do need people to help. Like, if you can lend facilities to organize meetings, things like that, all kinds of things like you can do anonymously to help, then you should take that role. You should be a Murray eel. And the other role, the public-facing role, you can't be anonymous.
And that touches on something that I really wanted to talk about. And if you don't want to share anything, that's fine. But I was wondering, having had so much of an organizational background and, boots on the ground experience that you've had, are there any experiences you had in your role as kind of leading a national movement, that any mistakes that you wish you could have avoided, or are there any mistakes you've seen others do that you would recommend people avoid if they're trying to do something similar?
Yeah, avoid bad optics and don't confirm people's stereotypes, because that just works against you. Like, people who agree with you but who are middle class and who are actually able to help you in terms of finance, in terms of abilities and so on, are not going to be attracted by you marching around in jackboots. So, keep those things away. Besides, ideas have their own time and place, and that's not currently what's going to be winning. It doesn't attract opinion, it doesn't attract support. So I think while we need a new idea, we need a new philosophy. Clearly, we need a new perspective on things because the old ideas are not going to convince over people. Populism is just agitated anti-system shouting. The dissident right is floundering because it has no guiding idea. What we need is some new philosophy. I'm not going to say I know which it is. I'm probably not going to be the one to discover it or develop it. But you need to be fresh, new, and to the times. This is why Nuke Fuentes initially was successful, and which is why he is now failing, because he fell back into the same problems we've seen so many other movements have. You need to be attractive to the middle class. Nationalism is inherently a philosophy of the middle class because the middle class is the core of the country. It's the financial and working core of the country. They swing the vote, and sure, I agree. Democracy is a bit of a joke, and elections are determined more by top-down elite interests than by the actual middle class. But you're going to have some power base. You're not going to be getting generals to commit a coup. You're not going to get the army on their side, but you can get the population on your side by convincing them that what you're promoting is in their own self-interest, and that the future that the current system has in store for them is not a positive one, not for them, not for their children. So a nationalist movement is one that needs to appeal to the middle class, and it needs to compromise on its aesthetics, and it doesn't need to compromise necessarily on the harshness of its ideas, but it does need to be careful about how it phrases them. If you use the wrong phrases, it's like a Pavlov reaction triggered by the liberal indoctrination they've received all the way through school and the media around them. So I think optics is actually a very important thing, which people joke about too much. But yeah, I think that's the biggest lesson to take away from the alt-right and so on.
That's a good point, because one thing I've noticed is when a lot of people talk about optics, they'll talk about not using slurs, which is fair enough. But I'm also trying to get away from using just internet language and slang. If you ever catch yourself saying the word normie in real life, walk in front of a train.
Yeah.
If you ever I'm a black pilled theory cell or whatever, I'm like, this just makes you an alien entity to all the people that matter. And I find that even a lot of the commentators who are guys in their 40s, sometimes in their 50s, and they're talking like Gen Z people. I'm like, this seems out of whack. This doesn't make sense to me. And I notice it myself, because if you spend time online, you're going to absorb it. But I'm like, I got to get out of this habit.
Yeah. Well, it depends to whom you speak, what image you project as well, right? If you're trying to appeal to a young audience, then you can use a different kind of language. And besides, you've got your in-group of your own convinced people who you're working with, and there it doesn't really matter how you talk, of course, except if it gets leaked. So I think we had this scandal a few years ago from Dries van Langenhoven, who is a parliamentarian for Vlaams Belang. He had a group called Schild en Vrienden, which was a youth nationalist organization group who do things like cleaning up the roads. They organize sporting events, these sorts of things. And their chat was leaked full of jokes about Anne Frank and Holocaust denial and all this stuff. And some of them are being prosecuted for it, Dries van Langenhoven himself too. So, be careful where and whom you talk to. Like, one thing I do when we talk is we put all the phones in the Faraday cage. We don't communicate important things online. These are things you should, keep your OPSEC good.
Yeah, and here's another idea for people, because sometimes if you're just on a call with someone, you'll be recorded and they'll leak those voice logs. One thing you can do is, if you speak in a black accent, then during the recording, you'll say, "That's not me. That was a black guy," because I don't talk like that. Similarly, in group chats, here's something people can do: italicize everything you're saying in a text, because then you can say, "No, that was a French accent." Do I sound like I have a French accent? No.
Well,
these are just some good ideas you're getting for free.
My way of dealing with this, I go into just random Canadians podcasts chats, and there I have all my bad optics chats, because Dutch Antifa wouldn't think to look there, now would they?
Looks like the spiders live to die another day. That's why you're trying to make all the inroads with all the Canadians, because it's the only safe space left for Europeans.
Yeah, they wouldn't expect me to be among the Anglos, considering I hate the Anglos so much. It's a perfect cover story. I would say, no, what, me, Faust?
Canada
no.
is the Switzerland. Your parents are cool giving you that name.
Yeah, well, my last name is Lancer, so people actually joked when I was in the news, like, is that really his name? Well, because it's such a mean German name.
One of the images that you've shown is you training. It looked like you were stabbing the golden one.
Yeah, we were practicing knife fighting. Yeah, I've boxed with him as well. We had a few sporting events back then, and of course, Golden One is known for his athleticism. So we had him over a couple times to do trainings with the guys, and we did things like boxing, knife fighting, grappling, jiu-jitsu training, these sort of things. It was part of the movement back then. These days, we encourage people to not do this in an organized group. Just train yourself, because it gives the media ammunition to say that you're preparing for a race war.
That's very interesting because over where we are, there's a lot of talk about active groups, which I think are good. I think it's good that men go out and socialize and meet in real life. But one of the things that they like to do, obviously, is box and get into martial arts. And I always wondered if that can be used against us. And that's what you found, that,
Yes.
if you're just meeting up to fight. Yeah.
The media found pictures and, of course, promotions of events, and they ran with the story that we were doing this because we were preparing for a race war, which is, of course, not really what was happening. We needed reasons to organize events, and one thing that a lot of people wanted to do was sports. So that's what we did. And it's also useful to learn self-defense. Now, I wouldn't say there isn't not an ideological component to that, but let's not get into that.
Well, a good way to do both would be just to play hockey. Get a hockey team going, and you
Of
can.
course, the Canadian wants to play hockey.
Yeah, fighting's a big part of it.
I played rugby myself in university, so yeah, I prefer rugby then. Yeah, one of the few good contributions the Anglos made to the world was the sport of hockey. Although I guess they also invented football, so that kind of counters it. And then, of course, the Americans, being Americans, completely made it gay and effeminate by making it American football, where they all wear armor and they play for 5 minutes and then they stop to run an ad so you can buy more stuff.
It's strange because I'm not in any way an anti-sports guy, and I have great respect for sports. I played sports at various points in my life, but I don't get football, man. I just don't. I don't get the draw. I get baseball. I don't get football.
I don't get either of those. I think mostly football is big because it's accessible. Like, anyone can play football without being very supremely athletic. Like, most other sports, like, for example, Olympic weightlifting or gymnastics, require quite a lot of skill. Swimming, you need some skill to be good at it. I mean, and with football, it's very accessible. You only need a ball. You need 22 guys. I mean, that's part of the popularity, I think. And to everyone, every young guy dreams of becoming a millionaire by becoming a footballer. Well, every black guy, anyway.
We have to get going soon because I've got more office work to do. But I wanted to ask you one last question.
Yes.
And if you'd rather not tell, it is what we talked about before. You had a story, one of your many stories, but it was a story about a noteworthy figure who came to visit your group. And yeah. I just enjoyed that story. Would you like to share that?
Yeah, so what happened was we had Greg Johnson as the keynote speaker at one of our conferences. And we had a guy who was part of the organization who was in charge of the VIP care, essentially. And he thought it would be funny to organize a dinner, VIP dinner with Greg Johnson and a number of special guests at a Brazilian restaurant where every 20 minutes, almost naked brown women came out dancing the samba, and loud Brazilian music would play. And we would all just be eating. Then suddenly the music would start. All these almost naked women would run around, start dancing. And we would just put down our knife and fork and stare at each other and just look at each other and wait for it to end. Just wait for it to end. And then I remember saying to Greg Johnson when the music was over and the women walked away, it's like, okay, let's get back to white people stuff. And then we continued the conversation. And that was one thing. And then another anecdote was that this same guy who was on that same trip in charge of VIP was then he took them to Amsterdam to give them a tour of the city because we had some time left over, and this was part of like the arrangement we had made with them, sort of like VIP treatment. And he thought it would be funny to take Greg Johnson to the red light district, and I think Jared Taylor was there at the time as well. And they walked around the red light district, and he kept joking about, look at him, look, yeah. And oh God, we were, oh, it was extremely embarrassing.
Jared Taylor in that scene is the thing that makes me laugh the most, because if anyone knows who he is and his demeanor and how he acts, like just him being dragged to the red light district in Amsterdam is the funniest shit I can think of.
Yeah, Jared, I met Jared Taylor once for about 2 days, and I was part of the group that was, I was one of the people in charge of housing him. Frody was there at the time as well, I think. And I found Jared Taylor to be an extremely polite. Oh yes, now I've met Jared Taylor several times actually. He came another time to this, and so this same guy again. We were at a VIP dinner. This was months and months later for another event, and this was like a fancy ballroom place at the upstairs side of a restaurant, and we were like 40 people there, all having VIP dinner. And this guy starts explaining My Little Pony to Jared Taylor, and just. I keep trying to tell him to stop, and he just keeps insisting on explaining the lore of My Little Pony to Jared Taylor. And again, it's just me and some other guys at the table, uncomfortable looking at each other, trying to butt in, stop the conversation. God, yeah, that guy is.
So what was this guy's deal? Was he like autistic, or was
he was exactly the kind of 4chan using shit poster you imagine. But he was friends with one of the original founders of the group, and he had gotten quite high in the organization. So he was given all kinds of jobs, which he probably wasn't qualified for. And he hates me anyway, so I don't care about telling these stories.
This has been a fantastic talk. I do need to get going. But I also want to say thank you very much, Faust. And if you would like to discuss again your project, your streaming project, what's that called again?
Europodcasts. It's called. And so what we really hope is that more content creators join us on there. And the idea is to form sort of a TRS style network, maybe not with the same bad optics. But the idea is things have been floundering, things have been very quiet, and we need some sort of new energy coming into the right wing in Europe. And I specifically don't want any Americans on it because it just causes drama that's unnecessary. And I think it would take any constructive energy away. So, and again, the argument I made before, they're like 5,000 kilometers away. How are they going to meaningfully be helping? How are they going to attend and organize conferences? How are they going to be involved in marches? It's way too much organizational capacity that would get involved with organizing together with Americans. So, really, we want to do it Europe and mostly Northern Europe as well, because that's where we're based and that's where a lot of the active nationalist movements are based.
Well, once it gets up and running to the level you would like, we would love to promote it however we can. I love stuff like this. I love guys who are starting their own thing. I think this is going to be essential going forward. And I wish you the best of luck. And if you have any things you learned while doing that, we can obviously talk about it again, because I think more people can do things like this, but in maybe a Canadian version, whatever. Since half of all people online are Canadian anyway.
All the shit posters seem to be.
Everyone's secretly... There's two types of people on the internet. There's white Canadian guys and Indians, and those are the only two you get.
Right. Thanks, man.
Do not let the rapists win. Listen and love Blood Satellite.